Dr. Emily Blackwood stifled a yawn as she reached for her third cup of coffee, the battered, I believe, mug, a relic from her grad school days. The midnight shift at Ganymede Research Station wasn't anyone's favorite assignment, but it gave her uninterrupted access to the quantum sensors, and on Jupiter's largest moon, those sensors picked up things that would make most astronomers question their sanity. Another thrilling night of ice crystals and radiation signatures, she muttered, taking a sip of the lukewarm coffee. The monitoring room hummed with the familiar symphony of equipment, the soft whir of cooling fans, the periodic beeping of automated checks, and the gentle hum of quantum processors analyzing data from deep space. The coffee cup was halfway to her lips when she felt it, a vibration so subtle it might have been her imagination. The liquid surface trembled, creating perfectly concentric rings that rippled outward. Emily froze, her mind immediately jumping to that ancient movie about dinosaurs her father loved so much. But this was Ganymede. No T-Rexes here, just ice and silence, and the quantum display erupted in a cascade of colors, patterns spiraling across her screens in impossible harmonics. Emily's hands flew across the haptic interface, trying to isolate the signal. This wasn't equipment failure. The patterns were too ordered, too precise. They pulsed with a rhythm that reminded her of. "That's not possible," she whispered, enhancing the frequency analysis. But the data didn't lie. The patterns matched biological signatures, specifically those associated with neural activity. Something out there in the ice and darkness was alive, and it was crying. Emily's fingers trembled as she initiated a full spectrum analysis. The signal was like nothing in their databases, not the crystalline life forms they'd found on Europa, not the bacterial colonies thriving in Titan's methane seas. This was orders of magnitude more complex, more advanced. The neural patterns suggested consciousness, intelligence, and something else that made her throat tight. Fear. "Computer, calculate signal origin," she commanded, already reaching for her tablet to alert the station's senior researcher. The machine hummed, triangulating the source. As the coordinates appeared on her screen, Emily felt her breath catch. The signal was coming from inside Ganymede itself, approximately 3 kilometers beneath the surface in a region they'd designated as dead space due to its lack of any notable activity. Until now. She was about to hit the emergency alert when something new appeared on her screens, a harmonic overlay that made her blood run cold. The crying wasn't random. It had patterns within patterns, mathematical sequences that reminded her of human infant distress calls, but translated into a language of quantum states and gravitational waves. "Computer, save all data to my private server and initiate Protocol 7, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Protocol 7 was meant for potential first contact scenarios that, until now, had been purely theoretical. As she stood to reach for the secure comm unit, another tremor shook the room, stronger this time. Her coffee cup tipped, dark liquid spreading across her desk like an omen. The quantum displays flared with new intensity, and Emily felt it in her bones, a deep, resonating grief that transcended language and species. Whatever was crying out there wasn't just scared. It was calling for help. Emily's hand hesitated over the comm unit. Standard procedure demanded she alert command immediately. They'd lock down the station, implement quarantine protocols, spend months debating the proper approach while whatever was out there continued to suffer. She glanced at her old mug, now lying on its side. "I believe," it proclaimed in faded letters. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. Sometimes believing meant acting even when, especially when, it meant breaking every rule in the book. "Computer, get me a secure line to Dr. Marcus in engineering. And prep my cold weather gear." She smiled grimly. "We're going on a little expedition. This is suicide, Emily." Dr. Marcus's breath came out in white puffs as they trudged through the maintenance tunnel. His safety harness clinked against the ice-encrusted walls, the sound echoing ominously in the confined space. "If command finds out we're down here without clearance." "They'll what, John?" Fire us. Emily checked her thermal readings again. The temperature had dropped another 15 degrees in the last 100 meters. We're already stuck on this ice cube at the ass end of the solar system. Besides, she added, tapping her tablet, look at these readings. The quantum signatures were getting stronger, more coherent. Each pulse sent shivers through their handheld equipment, and Emily could have sworn she felt them in her chest, like the bass at a concert she'd once attended back on Earth. It's the timing that bothers me, John muttered, adjusting his thermal suit's settings. 30 years we've been studying this moon, and suddenly we have equipment good enough to detect what was always here, Emily finished. She stopped at a junction, consulting her map. Left. And watch your step. The ice gets tricky here. They'd managed to assemble a small team, just 4 of them crazy enough to break protocol. Besides Emily and John, there was Dr. Sarah Hayes, their xenobiologist, and tech specialist James Chen, who'd managed to accidentally disable certain security protocols before joining them. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, and their headlamps seemed to dim, as if the darkness here was somehow thicker, more alive. Emily's tablet squealed, its screen flickering with interference. My God, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Look up. Their lights caught something embedded in the ceiling, a massive crystalline formation that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. But it wasn't the crystal that made them freeze. It was what was inside it. The creature was enormous, easily the size of a blue whale, but any comparison to Earth life ended there. Its body seemed to shift between states, sometimes appearing solid, sometimes translucent, sometimes barely there at all. Bioluminescent patterns rippled across its surface in complex waves, creating shapes that hurt Emily's eyes to look at directly. Temperatures dropped another 30 degrees, James reported, his voice tight. And these energy readings, they're off the scale. Whatever that thing is, it's putting out enough power to run the entire station for a year. Emily took a step forward, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The creature's patterns changed, responding to their presence. And then she saw it. Tentacles of pure light reaching down from the crystalline prison, like a child reaching for comfort. It's alive, she breathed. And it's conscious. Sarah, are you seeing these neural patterns? The xenobiologist was already recording, her own instrument struggling with the unprecedented readings. The complexity. Emily, this isn't just consciousness. These patterns suggest a level of awareness that might exceed our own. And look at the way it's reaching out. It's trying to communicate. Another pulse shook the chamber, stronger than before. Ice crystals rained down around them as the creature's cry resonated through the moon's core. But this time, Emily felt something else, an emotion so raw and primal it brought tears to her eyes. It's scared, she said softly. It's just a child, lost and afraid. The light tentacles reached further, brushing against their protective suits. Where they touched, Emily felt a tingling sensation, and her tablet screen erupted with data, complex mathematical sequences, quantum equations, and patterns that seemed to describe the very fabric of space-time. We need to help it, Emily declared, ignoring John's immediate protest. But first, her words were cut off by a new sound, a deep thrumming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Their equipment went haywire, and through the crystalline formation, they saw the young creature's patterns shift from fear to something else. Recognition. Somewhere out in the void, something had heard its cry, and it was coming. The first warning came from Neptune Station. Their quantum arrays went dark at 300 hours, followed by a burst of gravitational waves that knocked 3 satellites out of orbit. Emily watched the emergency broadcasts with growing dread, her hands clenched around her tablet as she stood in Ganymede Station's main control room. It's accelerating, James reported, his face illuminated by the harsh glow of multiple screens. Whatever it is, it just crossed Neptune's orbit in under 6 minutes. That's not possible. But they all knew impossible had stopped meaning anything the moment they'd found the creature in the ice. The young alien's cry had grown stronger, more urgent, its patterns shifting faster than their instruments could track. "Command wants us to initiate emergency protocols," Station Director Phillips announced, his weathered face ashen as he read the incoming orders. "Full evacuation of non-essential personnel. They're deploying the fleet." Emily felt a surge of anger. The fleet. They're going to treat this as a hostile action. "Something's tearing through our solar system at relativistic speeds, Dr. Blackwood," Phillips shot back. "What would you call it?" Before she could respond, every screen in the control room flickered and died. The backup generators kicked in with a whine, but even they seemed to struggle against some invisible force. Through the reinforced windows, Emily watched as streams of debris began to float past, ice crystals and rock fragments, all moving in impossible patterns. "It's not random," she whispered, pressing her hand against the cold glass. "Look at the debris field. It's forming structures, like a neural network." Sarah stepped up beside her, her own instruments tracking the phenomenon. "The patterns match what we saw in the chamber. But on this scale," she shook her head in wonder. "It's using the entire solar system as a communication medium." A new alarm blared. Proximity warnings from their outer sensors. Emily rushed to James's station, where one screen still functioned. The image made her breath catch. A massive object, larger than anything humanity had ever encountered, was approaching Ganymede. But it wasn't a ship or a weapon. It was alive. The mother's form defied description, bending light around it in ways that hurt to look at. Where the young one had been the size of a whale, this being dwarfed their entire station. Its bioluminescent patterns painted the space around Ganymede in colors humans had no names for. "My God," John whispered. "The mass readings. It's dragging half the Kuiper belt with it." The station shuddered as the first gravitational waves hit. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the facility, but Emily knew they were meaningless against this kind of power. If the being wanted to, it could crush them all without effort. But something else was happening. The debris field around the station began to move with purpose, forming complex crystalline structures that mirrored the patterns they'd seen in the chamber below. Emily's tablet, despite being dead, suddenly projected a series of images directly into her mind. "You're seeing this too," she gasped, looking at her colleagues' stunned faces. They nodded, transfixed by the vision being shared. Earth, hundreds of millions of years ago, and beams of light seeding the oceans with something precious. Not life itself, but the potential for a specific kind of consciousness. The mother hadn't come to attack. She'd come to see what her ancient experiment had produced. That's why the child is here, Emily realized, the pieces falling into place. It's not trapped. It's waiting. We're part of some kind of test, and our response to its cry. She looked at her colleagues, seeing the same understanding dawn in their eyes. The entire station rocked again as another wave hit, stronger than before. But this time, Emily felt something else beneath the fear and awe. A sense of recognition, of evaluation. The mother was watching, waiting to see what they would do next. And somehow, Emily knew their next actions would determine not just their own fate, but humanity's place in a universe far stranger and more conscious than they'd ever imagined. The quantum resonance chamber wasn't designed for human use. Emily knew this as she watched Dr. Hayes calibrate the machinery, its crystalline arrays humming with an energy that made her teeth ache. The chamber, normally used to study quantum entanglement phenomena, now represented their best chance at communication. "This is insane," John protested, checking her vital signs for the third time. "The neural feedback alone could fry your brain. We don't even know if." "Did you see what happened to Rodriguez?" Emily cut him off, referring to their security chief who tried to follow evacuation protocols. The moment he'd attempted to power up the escape pods, tendrils of light had wrapped around the entire launch bay, sealing it in crystalline structures identical to those trapping the young alien. "We're not going anywhere until we solve this." The mother's arrival had changed everything. While the military scrambled to position their useless weapons, the vast being had created a quantum field around Ganymede that defied their understanding of physics. They were effectively trapped in a bubble of altered spacetime. "Neural interface ready," Sarah announced, her voice tense. "Emily, the patterns we recorded from the juvenile, they're incredibly complex. If you try to process them directly—" "I'm not going to process them," Emily interrupted, settling into the chamber's central pod. "I'm going to feel them." The revelation had come to her while studying the ancient memories the mother had shared. The beings hadn't just seeded Earth with life. They'd seeded it with the capacity for emotional intelligence. What if that was the key? Starting quantum field alignment, James called out from his station. "Emily, your brainwave patterns will be translated into quantum states that match the alien's frequency. But we have no way to filter what comes back." Emily closed her eyes as the chamber hummed to life. "Sometimes understanding requires us to be vulnerable." She managed a small smile. "Just don't let my brain melt." The first connection felt like being struck by lightning. Emily's consciousness exploded into a realm of pure quantum information, patterns of reality so complex they threatened to overwhelm her. She screamed, but no sound emerged from her lips. Then she felt it. Beneath the tsunami of data, a presence, young, frightened, but brilliantly alive. The alien child reached for her mind like a drowning person grasping for rescue. Emily threw aside her scientific training, her human need to categorize and understand. Instead, she opened herself to the raw emotion of the moment. She thought of her own childhood fears, of dark nights and monsters under the bed. She thought of her mother's comfort, of being held and told everything would be all right. The alien consciousness intertwined with hers, and suddenly she was experiencing its memories. The vast cold between galaxies, the song of quantum harmonies that made up its language, the terror of being separated from the collective consciousness of its kind. But most importantly, she felt its loneliness. "You're not alone," she thought, not in words but in pure emotional resonance. "We understand loneliness. We understand fear. Let me show you." She projected her own memories. The first day of school, leaving home for college, the isolation of deep space. With each memory, she shared the human capacity to endure separation, to grow through it. The alien's response nearly stopped her heart. A flood of joy so intense it manifested as visible light throughout the station, shooting through the quantum neural network the mother had created. The child had found something it never expected, a species that could truly comprehend its emotional state. But with that joy came something else. The child's nightmares. Emily saw vast dark spaces between realities, predators that hunted through quantum states, and dangers humanity had never imagined. The child wasn't just lost, it was hiding. As Emily's consciousness began to fade, overwhelmed by the connection, she felt one final message imprint itself in her mind. A warning. The test wasn't just about humanity's capacity for empathy. It was about our readiness to face what lurked in the spaces between stars. Emergency shutdown. She heard John shout from what seemed like light years away. Her neural patterns are destabilizing. The last thing Emily saw before darkness took her was the chamber filled with impossible light, and in that light, patterns that would change humanity forever. Emily awoke to a world transformed. The medical bay's walls rippled with quantum patterns, light bending in ways that made her physicist's mind revel. She tried to sit up, but John's gentle hand held her down. "Easy," he said, checking her vitals. "You've been out for 6 hours. Your brain activity." He shook his head. "We've never seen anything like it." "The child," Emily croaked, her throat dry. "Is it still there?" "But that's not our biggest concern right now." John helped her sit up slowly, turning her to face the window. "Look." The view of Ganymede's surface had changed dramatically. Where there had been endless ice fields, now stood crystalline structures that reached toward the stars like ancient cathedral spires. But it was what loomed above them that made Emily's breath catch. the mother had fully manifested. Its form defied Euclidean geometry, existing in what seemed to be multiple dimensions simultaneously. Parts of it stretched into space-time configurations that human eyes couldn't process, while others condensed into patterns of pure light that wrote themselves across the moon's surface. The being's consciousness pressed against reality like an ocean against a paperboat. "They've been trying to nuke it," Sarah said quietly from the doorway. "Every weapon just passes through, like it's not even in the same reality as us. But that's not the strangest part." She walked over, holding out Emily's tablet. "Look what it's been doing." The screen showed real-time data from their quantum sensors. The mother was manipulating gravitational fields with impossible precision, creating what looked like. "It's a map," Emily whispered, recognition flooding through her still-linked consciousness. No, not just a map. A history. The patterns showed Earth across geological time, but focused on something specific: the development of the human brain. Each gravitational pulse highlighted a different evolutionary leap in consciousness, moments when humanity had developed new capacities for emotion, empathy, and understanding. "It was them," Emily said, the child's memories merging with her own understanding. "They didn't just watch us evolve. They nudged us. Not physically, but consciously. They wanted to see if consciousness could evolve differently here." "Different from what?" John asked. Before Emily could answer, a new presence filled the room. The mother's attention, previously spread across space, focused directly on them. Emily felt her mind expand as the being initiated contact, far gentler than her connection with the child had been. Images flooded her consciousness. Vast cosmic wars fought with consciousness itself as the weapon, civilizations that had evolved without emotion or empathy becoming cosmic horrors, and the Resonator's decision to seed potentially habitable worlds with the capacity for a different kind of evolution. "They're not here to invade," Emily gasped, translating the stream of information for her colleagues. "They're here because we succeeded. We evolved consciousness with empathy as its foundation." She paused, processing more of the message. "But there's something else. Something hunting." The mother's communication shifted, showing them glimpses of things that existed between dimensions, drawn to conscious life like predators to prey. The child hadn't been trapped in the ice. It had been hiding, protected within a quantum sanctuary, while it waited to see if humanity would pass the test. That's why it called out, Emily realized. Not just because it was scared, but because it needed to know if we could hear it, if we could feel it. The mother's form shifted, parts of it passing through multiple realities simultaneously. Through their connection, Emily understood it was scanning nearby space, checking for threats. But there was something else in its movements, a recognition of humanity that felt almost like pride. "It recognizes something in us," Sarah breathed, watching the pattern shift. "Something familiar." Emily nodded, still processing the flood of information. "Because they engineered us to be like them, not physically, but emotionally. We're their greatest experiment, their hope for." She trailed off as a new realization hit her, one that would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the cosmos. "Their hope for what?" John asked. Emily turned to them, her eyes reflecting impossible colors. "Their hope for successors. Because something's coming, something they've been preparing us to face. And now we know why they chose Earth all those millions of years ago." The mother's presence pulsed in agreement, and Emily understood that this wasn't just a reunion between parent and child. It was a graduation ceremony for the human race. The crystalline formations throughout Ganymede Station had begun to pulse in sync with human brainwave patterns. Emily watched the rhythmic display from the observation deck, her mind still reeling from the quantum echoes of her connection with both aliens. Behind her, the emergency council had gathered, what remained of the station's leadership after half the crew had been evacuated. "You're telling us," Director Phillips said slowly, "that humanity is some kind of cosmic experiment." "Not experiment," Emily corrected, turning from the window. "Legacy. The quantum patterns in her brain left by the mother's communication made certain concepts clearer now. We're their investment in the future of consciousness itself. Sarah stepped forward, projecting a holographic display of human neural evolution. The evidence was always there. We just didn't know what to look for. These quantum patterns in our neural structure. She highlighted specific sequences. They're not random mutations. They're engineered guidelines for the development of empathic consciousness. The ice formation, James added, pulling up scans of the trapped child's prison. It's not just ice. It's a quantum computer of unprecedented complexity. The patterns match structures we found in human DNA, specifically in regions we thought were jump code. Emily nodded, the pieces falling into place. The child isn't trapped. It's interfacing with a testing system that's millions of years old, the same system that helped guide our evolution. She touched the window, watching the crystalline structures shift in response. And now it's active because we're ready for the next step. Ready for what? Phillips demanded. The answer came not in words, but in a surge of quantum information that filled the room. The mother's consciousness spread through the station systems, transforming their primitive displays into windows into higher dimensions. Through these windows, they saw what the resonators had been preparing humanity for. The spaces between realities teemed with predators, beings that evolved consciousness without empathy, becoming cosmic horrors that fed on aware species. The resonators had once been like them, until they made a choice to change, to develop emotional intelligence alongside their vast powers. They seeded countless worlds, Emily translated, watching the history unfold. But Earth was special. Something in our planet's quantum foundation made us more receptive to emotional evolution. We developed empathy faster, deeper, than any other seeded world. And the child? John asked. Why is it really here? Emily's expression softened. Because it's not just a child. It's a key. She walked to the center of the room, where the quantum displays converged. The ice formation isn't a prison. It's a gateway. The child knew what was coming, knew we needed to be tested, to prove we were ready. Through their enhanced perception, they could now see what the ice formation truly was. A quantum nexus point, a doorway to higher dimensions where the real war for consciousness was being fought. The child had waited within it, calling out not just to its mother, but to humanity itself. Ready for what? Phillips asked again. But this time his voice held more awe than skepticism. Emily looked around at her colleagues, seeing the same understanding dawn in their eyes. Ready to join them. The resonators aren't just our ancestors. They're our teachers, and now they're offering us graduation. The station hummed with new energy as the mother's consciousness interfaced more deeply with their systems. Through the quantum network, Emily felt the child's joy, its excitement at finding worthy siblings in humanity. But beneath that joy lay urgency. The predators are coming, Emily said, feeling the truth of it in her enhanced consciousness. The child's cry wasn't just a test. It was a warning and a call to arms. The crystalline structures throughout the station pulsed once, brilliantly, revealing their true nature. They weren't just communication devices or sensors. They were templates, showing humanity how to ascend to a higher state of being. But first, they had to free the child. Not from the ice, from the dimensional pocket it had hidden in while waiting for humanity to evolve. And that would require something unprecedented. A synchronized leap of human consciousness on a global scale. Emily looked at her colleagues, her mind already formulating a plan. Get me a direct line to Earth's quantum communications network, she said. It's time for humanity to answer the call. Global quantum sync in 3 minutes, James announced, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. Around him, Ganymede Station had transformed into something barely recognizable as human technology. Crystalline growths merged with computer systems, creating a hybrid network that stretched from the station all the way back to Earth. Emily stood in the modified resonance chamber, now enhanced by the mother's quantum engineering. Neural interfaces covered her body, connecting her not just to the chamber, but to the worldwide network they'd hastily assembled. Through it, she could feel the minds of millions of humans preparing for what they were about to attempt. "Are you sure about this?" John asked, checking her vitals one last time. The neural load of coordinating this many minds. "We don't have a choice," Emily replied, watching the quantum patterns swirl around them. The predators detected the child's cry. "They're coming." Through her enhanced perception, she could feel them. Vast, hungry things sliding between dimensions, drawn to the beacon of conscious life. Sarah's voice came through the comm system. "Quantum entanglement networks are online. We're receiving confirmation from all major population centers. Even the skeptics are joining in after seeing the mother's demonstrations." The past 12 hours had been a blur of global revelation. The mother had proved her existence to Earth in ways that couldn't be denied, showing humanity glimpses of both their true heritage and the threats they faced. Now, 7 billion human minds were about to attempt something unprecedented, a synchronized quantum consciousness leap. 30 seconds, James called out. Neural pattern matching at 89% and climbing. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the connection build. Through the quantum network, she could sense the child's anticipation, its patterns shifting faster as the moment approached. The mother's vast consciousness surrounded them all, providing the framework for what they were about to attempt. "Remember," Emily broadcast to the global network, her thoughts translated into every human language simultaneously. "Don't try to understand it. Feel it, the same way you'd reach out to comfort a crying child. Let your empathy guide you." 10 seconds. The station hummed with power as quantum fields aligned. Emily felt her consciousness expand, touching millions of others. Scientists in their labs, children in their beds, farmers in their fields, all connected, all reaching out together. Now, Emily opened herself fully to the connection, becoming a conduit for humanity's collective empathy. The sensation was overwhelming. Millions of minds sharing their most profound experiences of comfort, love, and connection. She felt a mother cradling her newborn, a child hugging their best friend, lovers sharing their first kiss, an elderly couple holding hands in their final moments together. The collective emotion surged through the quantum network, transforming into pure energy. The crystalline formations throughout Ganymede began to sing, resonating with frequencies that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through their shared consciousness, Emily felt the child respond. Its quantum prison began to shift, not breaking but transforming, responding to something the predator species could never understand: the power of shared emotional experience. But the effort was taking its toll. Across Earth, people strained under the neural load. Emily felt minds beginning to buckle, the connection starting to fray. The child was nearly free, but they needed something more. "Hold on," she broadcast, pushing through the pain. "Remember why we're doing this. We're not just saving one child. We're proving what makes us human." Through the quantum field, she shared her own deepest memories. Her father's last smile before cancer took him, her mother's unwavering support through every failure and success, the moment she first looked through a telescope and felt connected to the cosmos. The response was immediate. Across the globe, humans dug deeper, sharing their most profound moments of connection. The quantum resonance built to impossible levels, and Emily felt something fundamental shift in the fabric of reality itself. With a sound that existed in no physical dimension, the child's quantum prison transformed. The being emerged not into normal space, but into a higher dimensional state that human minds could barely perceive. Through their shared consciousness, Emily felt its joy, its triumph, and its warning. Because in freeing the child, humanity had done more than pass a test. They had announced their presence to the cosmos, and not everything out there would welcome their emergence with such benevolence. As the global consciousness connection began to fade, Emily caught one last glimpse through the child's perception. Vast, dark shapes moving between the stars, turning their attention toward Earth. The graduation ceremony was over. The real test was about to begin. 3 days after the global consciousness event, Emily stood in what remained of Ganymede Station's observation deck. The crystalline growths had become permanent fixtures, transforming the human facility into something that straddled multiple realities. Through the quantum-enhanced windows, she watched the child and mother communicate in ways that made conventional physics weep. "The neural integration is stable," Sarah reported, coming to stand beside her. 17% of the human population now shows significant quantum consciousness enhancement. The numbers are growing every day. Emily nodded, feeling the expanded awareness that had become her new normal. The global effort to free the child had changed humanity in fundamental ways. Those who had participated most deeply in the connection had retained abilities that their ancestors had only dreamed about. "Any word from the deep space arrays?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. She could feel them out there, the predators, moving through the dark spaces between stars. "They're coming," John confirmed, joining them at the window. "But we're not the same species they detected when the child first cried out." He held up a tablet showing the latest scans of human neural evolution. The changes were extraordinary. The mother's form shifted, a portion of her vast consciousness focusing on their conversation. Through their enhanced perception, they received not just thoughts but entire conceptual frameworks. The resonators had seeded countless worlds, hoping to create species that could evolve consciousness with empathy at its core. Earth had succeeded beyond their expectations. "We're not just their experiment anymore," Emily translated for the others, still learning to interpret the quantum language. "We're their legacy. The next stage in the evolution of conscious empathy." Through the station's enhanced sensors, they watched as the child demonstrated its true purpose. Its consciousness expanded, connecting with the quantum networks humanity had built. Information flooded their systems, the collected knowledge of the Resonator's civilization, accumulated across millions of years. "It's not just knowledge," Sarah breathed, watching the data streams. "It's potential. They're showing us what we can become." Emily felt it too. The child hadn't been trapped in that ice formation. It had been waiting, preserving something precious until humanity was ready to receive it. Now, as the information flowed, she understood why the predator species were so afraid. Empathy wasn't weakness, as they believed. It was the key to a kind of power they could never achieve. "Look," John pointed through the window. The mother and child were creating something new, a demonstration of what humanity would need to become. Their combined consciousness reshaped local spacetime, creating structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through these structures, Emily could see the approaching threats more clearly: vast, ancient intelligences that had evolved without emotion, becoming cosmic horrors that fed unaware species. But she could also see the defense against them: a network of conscious empathy, spanning galaxies, maintained by species that had evolved along paths similar to humanity's. The resonators weren't just their teachers, they were welcoming humanity into a cosmic community. "They're offering us a choice," Emily said, understanding flowing through her enhanced consciousness. "We can remain as we are, and they'll help us defend ourselves. Or, Sarah prompted, "or we can take the next step. Complete the evolution they began millions of years ago." Emily turned to her colleagues, her eyes reflecting quantum possibilities. "They're not just thanking us for saving the child. They're offering us graduation." Through their connection, the mother showed them glimpses of what humanity could become: beings of pure conscious energy, maintaining their empathy while transcending physical form. The child's rescue hadn't just been a test, it had been preparation for a greater transformation. As if to emphasize the point, new crystalline structures began growing throughout the solar system, creating a network that would allow humanity to take its first steps toward this new state of being. The predators weren't just coming to feed. They were coming to witness the birth of something they had never imagined possible. Emily smiled, feeling the combined hope of two civilizations flowing through her consciousness. "We spent so long looking up at the stars," she said softly, wondering if we were alone. Turns out, we were just waiting for the right moment to join the family. Around them, the station hummed with possibility as humanity began its greatest journey, not out into space, but into a new way of being conscious. The child's cry hadn't just been a call for help. It had been an invitation to evolve.